Alright guys, HyDra back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Clayster has come up with a pretty hot take from his own perspective on where he stands in the all-time best CoD players to ever play the game list. He reckons that he's second place, behind Incrim's Exporter, but ahead of Scump, ahead of Karma, and certainly ahead of Formal. Does his analysis check out on this one? Do you guys agree with what he's saying? Very much intrigued to your perspective in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, first of all, wanted to mention on the challenger side, there's been some drama going down really on the scrim schedule. This is a talking point that's happened for some time, especially because we saw the announcement or the reveal, I guess, from Awoba the other day on the expenses that he was paying to fund his team for the last season. They were a pretty good team. They won a lot of money at international tournaments. He took, I think as an organization, they took like 20% of that. The rest of it went to the players. And in fairness, because they were, based in Europe, it's going to cost more to get flights out there and stuff like this. And he revealed that he made like a 10k loss pretty much over the course of the season, probably recouped that, if not went into the green by, actually selling a couple of the players to the CDL with buyouts and the like. But it was interesting to look at, and this is the issue that even if you're a pretty good challengers team, you're not really going to be getting much salary, if any at all. And many of these guys have now realized, and maybe they've known it for some time, and some players have already done this, that they can't really sustain it being a challenger player full time. Like, they need a job. They need to be doing school and challengers, or, maintain a stable job and do challenges as well. Especially, I don't know if Panda is still going to compete, but I know that he had a child, I think, recently. So for players in that position, it's, you can't just play challenges 24/7. There isn't the money from the prize earnings. You're not really getting any salary to sustain that. Now, if the CDL bumped up the prize pool in challenges, maybe it's more sustainable, but it's kind of more like what it was 10, 12 years ago in the actual professional side, where players were at school or they were holding down a job, and then at night they would come home and scrim all evening, and then they would go to the tournament to try and win a few $100, which eventually turned into what it has become today. And this is where the question has been, that for some reason, for the last several years, the Challengers players have played on the same scrim schedule as the CDL pros. Like, they'll start practicing at like 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. or something Eastern time, the same as the pros that are doing this as a literal full-time job, which doesn't really make much sense, because it means that players that actually want to maintain a job can't really do so, because, their first set of scrims is at like 1 p.m. and they're meant to be working like 9 to 5 or whatever, which really creates some issues. What it used to be was that you'd get home at 5, and then you'd get on, maybe have some food or whatever, get on and scrim at 6, and then do a couple of scrim sets, and that would be you done for the day. So this is what Pentagram's discussing, that instead of doing the 2 p.m. scrim sets, just cancel that one and do like 2 scrim sets later in the day. I think that makes more sense. Hopefully the Challengers players can actually agree to do this, because they've got to realize that the way it's currently operating isn't sustainable. Not to say they shouldn't be able to do this and shouldn't be able to try and get into the Pro League, but the way it's currently structured just makes it really difficult for anyone that actually wants to try and make this sustainable and have a job, and also try and make it into the CDL as like a dream on the side, effectively, is what it seems like Challengers is presently becoming, unfortunately. But with more support, the story on that could change in the future. Now let's talk Clayster. I know that CoD Archive was doing Clay dirty here with, best of Clayster 5 seconds of the clip right here, but Clay was giving his thoughts on, well, it really was started a few days ago with this discussion on the Mount Rushmore, when the CDL came out with Clay, Scump, Karma, and Crim as their kind of 4 pillars, I suppose, of Call of Duty Esports. We discussed other, the likes of Nadeshot and others that could potentially be on here, but it's definitely a valid decision, I suppose, from the CDL. Now, Clayster gives his thoughts on this, and look, Clay is going to be biased in favor of Clay. Obviously, that's how it works. As with all the players, be biased in favor of their own personal career. But Clay, compared to the other greatest of all times, is definitely in quite a significantly different position, because a lot of the other players on there, understandably, were on the OpTic dynasty, right? They dominated for years, got lots of accolades, lots of championships, lots of tournaments won. Clay wasn't on that team. He was battling against that team, and given the circumstances Clay has found himself in, it's undisputed that he's done incredibly well with, I guess the hand that he's been dealt in some respect. And also, I value longevity quite a lot in these conversations, and Clay has had like the longest career pretty much, from competing back in the Modern Warfare 2 days, like literally 2009, 2010, to still competing today. That is incredible. And Karma's career being maybe 8, 9 years does start to, in my opinion, carry a bit less weight with Clay still going. Now, given Clay hasn't won anything in the last couple of years, I think it doesn't really add that much. But if Clay was to win another event, I think personally that could well put him as number 2 all time. I'm not sure buying that he's quite there yet, but this is why Clayster believes that's the case.
As we sit here today, he's 31, hella years in COD, still, still going to keep grinding, still a competitor, still wants to keep playing, still's going to keep playing. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think the answer for that has changed throughout the years. There's a time where I wanted to have the most chips or the most money earned or the most accolades and all that, right? I think, for me now is I want to be known as, just one of the best to ever play. If I'm in the conversation, top 5, top 10, it doesn't really bother me, where I'm at. I don't think I'm number 1. But I do think I mean, this can be your clickbait, but I do think I'm the second best player of all time. I think there's only one person I'll put above me. And
who is that?
Of course,
you don't want to say it, I know.
It's Crim.
Okay.
Crim's the only one I'll put above me.
Yeah.
I truly believe I've accomplished more with less. I think you can look at achievements that people like Formal, Damon, Scump have, but with what I had to deal with, what the teams I had to form and the rosters I put together that competed with them, and they were like the dynasty, right? The rosters I had to work with and the rings that I won with the teams that I won them with are teams that I put together with people nobody wanted, you know what I'm saying? I feel like what I had to go through to get my accomplishments was way harder than anybody other than Porter. Porter's the only other player I'll be all right, I'll give it to you, bro.
His number speaks for itself.
I'll give it to you, bro.
Yeah.
But I truly believe I'm the second best. But as long as I am in that conversation, I'm happy. Dude, I mean, it's a game millions of people play, right? Tens of millions of people play. If I'm in the top 10 best players of all time.
So despite the drama and the friction with Crim, he gives him his flowers, right? He's like, look, fair enough, Crim, you're number 1. I think pretty much this is unanimous, really, in terms of results across Complexity, Evil Geniuses, OpTic Gaming, Dallas Empire. This was, I believe, his end of career stats. An average placing of 3.8 is pretty absurd. 51 appearances in finals, 38 tournament wins. No one can really get close to these type of numbers. Now, it's not all about the numbers, but in terms of numbers, Crim does lead the charge. It is not like he wasn't a good player either. Crim was a really good player in, I think, Infinite Warfare. That season he was underrated. World War II he was fantastic, but unfortunately OpTic around him weren't so good. CoD Ghosts, Crim was a monster and arguably for a time the best player in the game. So to me, Crim is clearly, in terms of accolades and achievements and that type of stuff, Crim's clearly number 1. I don't really think that's massively disputed at the moment. Now, this is Clayster's career card. This is from a couple of years ago now. I don't think there's been one made in the last couple of years, but the numbers haven't got better, shall we say, because he went on to the Subliners. They had a decent year in Cold War. They did make a finals, to be fair, online Major 2. Then they didn't have a particularly good run. Vanguard was a disaster, and then Vegas, while impressive what Clay achieved with that team, I think, all things considered, it's not like it added much to his numbers, let's say. So at the time, this is post-World Championship win in 2020. 3 World Championship wins, obviously an average placing of about 580 pro tournaments, 18 tournament wins. So in terms of tournament wins, significantly behind Crim with 38, let's not forget, and also significantly behind Scump and Karma and even Formal, as we'll see. So looking at it from a tournament win numbers perspective, sure, Clay is only 5th, but I don't think that tells the whole story. I think I personally have Clay about 4th because I have him above Formal personally. In terms of career longevity, what Clay has done, and yeah, Formal's won, 1 world title, 23 tournament wins, but Clay's a 3-time world champion. He did it on so many different teams and, competed for longer than Formal. Formal versus Clay, all-time at peak performance. You might have to slightly tip it to Formal, but even then, people forget how unbelievably good Clayster was at, let's say, Advanced Warfare, when Formal was also ridiculously good as well. But Advanced Warfare Clay was an absolute monster and definitely underrated in terms of how good Clay actually was at his peak performance, I would say, especially for a lot of newer fans that come in. So I think from a few different metrics, I personally have Clay above Formal. That's the way that my list goes. But then we get to Karma, and Karma's a really interesting one because, I mean, when he retired in 2020, I think pretty unanimously the community had him as the greatest of all time. He was the only, at the time, 3-time world champion, but shortly after he retired, and he's the only one, of course, to do it all on LAN, but shortly after he retired, then Crimsix and Clay got their third online, yes, but still they got their third, and then they competed for another couple of years. Crim then made plenty more finals in Cold War and then won another event in Vanguard, so you know, that kind of cemented Crim a little bit further, I would say, over Karma. And then Scump won another event in Vanguard as well. And that kind of extra couple of years of play kind of put Karma from being like the GOAT to down to pretty much third. And now people are saying, is he fourth or is he even top 5? I don't know. Like, people seem to be disrespecting Karma's success quite a fair bit because he was massively integral to the results that they had. And he's had 24 tournament wins. So can you argue Clay is above Karma? I think you can from Clay's perspective, and we'll get into what that might be in a second. Can you argue Clay is above Scump? I think it's definitely more of a challenge. If you rate rings and world championship success very highly, then you can, because, you know, only one champs win for Scump, 3 champs wins for Clayster, but you know, in terms of finals appearances, tournament wins, 30 compared to 18 is quite the difference, and you've got to come up with some good reasons as to why that is you know, that is okay to overlook in this sense, even if you're not considering what Scump has done outside of CoD or like outside of the pure numbers, in which case he's clearly number 1, to be honest. But if you're just looking at the numbers, then I would say right now he's number 2. Now, obviously, you can't really see much here because it's very much, you know, pixelated, but I just wanted you to be able to see the kind of numbers on the left-hand side so you can see the victories. This is Clayster's career from back in the Black Ops 2 days, really, when events started to be considered kind of premier. Winning these events, the number 1s you guys can see on the Complexity team back then, because he was dropped from Complexity while they became Evil Geniuses, and even still, I mean, they managed to win during this season in Ghost. The X Games, I don't believe it's actually appearing on here because it's not considered like a premier event or whatever I filter these by, but, you know, all things considered, given the fact that Clay was dropped from the most dominant team ever and didn't get to experience all of the W's that followed with that, Karma got them instead. He still did very well on OpTic, all things considered. Then he formed a team with Denial, won the World Championship, and this is where people will say, oh, well, Clay's career doesn't look so good, is this period during Black Ops 3, IW, World War 2, and into the start of Black Ops 4, when Clay won 0 events, apart from PlayStation Invitational, which most people don't really count, in 1,400 days. And it was a big talking point at the time that Clay had only won, you know, he hadn't won in 1,400 days. But I think you've got to say that given Clay's situation and the fact that he wasn't on the OpTic Dynasty and was playing against the OpTic Dynasty for years, he probably does deserve more credit than he gets. And then when they did finally form this team with United, and you know, and then they started to win pretty much everything at the end of that season, and Clay was a massively integral part as to why. Now, yes, Clay was nearly getting dropped at the start of that season, but they got rid of Jacob instead for Simp, and obviously it worked out emphatically. And you can say that Clay got carried in all this, but he was definitely a really important factor for these teams, and then wins the World Championship next year again. So I think it's so impressive what Clay did to be able to go from not winning anything for years to then bouncing back and winning 2 champs in a row, and then getting dropped again, having to try and climb his way back, which he did relatively impressively over the last couple of years, but obviously a bit of a shambles for the last couple of seasons. So I don't know. Personally, I'm not sure there's enough in here to say that Clay is above Karma or above Scump. I still have him number 4, but I can see why Clay believes what he says. And given the circumstances Clay has found himself in during his career and the incredible longevity that he's shown, I don't think that, I think one more event win for Clay, if he could magically get one somehow, whatever team he's on next season, would really put the cat amongst the pigeons, I think, in terms of where he sits. But that's just my perspective on the matter. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.